Hey, what's going on, guys? Thanks for tuning in. Join us here today as we begin our study of the lion's den in Daniel chapter 6 here on the Last Things podcast. It's your boy Damien coming to you once again with another episode of the Last Things podcast, where we are on a journey to truth. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to come before you once again as we discuss the Word of God. How is everybody doing on today? Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this week's episode, man. I greatly appreciate you guys from the bottom of my heart. As I say, this podcast will be nothing if it's not for you guys. So thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode, man. If you like it, if you like the content that we're delivering, man, hit subscribe on the button. If you're looking by way of YouTube, hit subscribe and click the bell icon so you'll be notified whenever we release future content. And for those of you who listening by way of stream, check us out on YouTube. And those who look at us on YouTube, if you're on the go one day, you can't catch us on YouTube, we're always streaming. You can find us on all the major streaming platforms. So guys, come check us out. Last week we finished up Daniel chapter 5. It was a lot going on in that chapter, not just from what was going on within the kingdom of Babylon, but also what was going on outside the kingdom at the same time. As Daniel was dealing with Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, as Daniel was dealing with that, on the outside, you had Cyrus and the Medo-Persian Empire preparing to invade Babylon. So you have both of those key things going on at the same time. And as I said, the connection with Daniel 5 and Daniel 2 is the prophecy that Daniel gave Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2 when when Nebuchadnezzar saw the statue with all the different metals, right? We know that Nebuchadnezzar was the head of gold, and we also know now that another kingdom was after the Babylons, the Babylonian Empire. There was going to be another kingdom come up inferior to his. That kingdom was what? The chest and arms, which were what? Made of silver. And now we have that kingdom of chest and arms, that silver kingdom that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dreams, as Daniel is alive to see take over Babylon. So I'm saying 40 years. I think it's more than 40 years, but at least 40 years after Daniel gave that prophecy to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is dead and gone, but guess what? Daniel is still alive. And guess what? He is alive to see that prophecy come to fruition. See, that's why the Bible says God watches over his word to perform it. If God said it, he's going to do it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You can bank on it. So if God told you something, just know he's going to do it. Don't look at how long it's going to take. Don't look at the length. People think that God tells us something, he's going to do it right then and there, or he's going to do it the next day. He can do it, but long as what he said he's going to do, as long as he does it, that's all that really should matter to us. Don't look at the time length. As you see how long it was for Daniel. It was at least 40 years before God did what he said, what he said he was going to do. But nevertheless, God still did it. Okay. So keep that. So always remember that God will honor his word. Okay. He's not a man and he shall lie. Okay. So if he told you something that he was going to do, bank on it to be true. Okay. So now Belshazzar, who was the king at the time of the Babylonians, was killed. And now Darius the Mede has come to take over. and now we're here at chapter 6. There's not a big time jump between Daniel 5 and Daniel 6. This is just my opinion, but I think this might have been like within a few days after. I think this all happened within a few days of itself. This is just my opinion, of course. Okay. So, so now that was the backdrop of where we are here to Daniel 6. And like I said, we had a lot going on in Daniel 5, but it was good that we talked about all those things because now we have the setup for Daniel 6. And we know Daniel 6 is one of the most is another popular story in the Bible that a lot of youth when we're young, we're always taught about Daniel and the lion's den. So we're here at this we're here. But before we get started, I want you to know God had already been forewarning other prophets that he was going to allow the Medo-Persians to take over. He had been doing it. If you look at Isaiah chapter 13, verse 17 through 18, let me pull it up on my laptop. Isaiah chapter 13, verse 17 through 18. And this is what it says. Okay. Look, I will stir up the Medes against Babylon. They cannot be tempted by silver or bribed with gold. The attacking armies will shoot down the young men with arrows. They will have no mercy on helpless babies and will show no compassion for children. You see that? Now, if you keep on, you can keep reading if you want to. And it just talks about how Babylon, the most glorious kingdom, would be devastated like Sodom and Gomorrah. Babylon will never be inherited again. Babylon's days are numbered. It talks about Babylon's destruction, right? And look at what it said. It talked about it coming from the Medes, which we know happened with the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay. Now, if you look at Jeremiah chapter 51, if you go to verse 11, verse 11 says this: sharpen the arrows, lift up the swords, for the Lord has inspired the king of the Medes to march against Babylon and destroy her. This is his vengeance against those who desecrated his temple. Remember, that's the same thing what happened with Belshazzar, that same thing what Belshazzar got in trouble for. Nebuchadnezzar did it as well, but Belshazzar took the items from the kingdom, from the temple, and him and his group began drinking from those items that were in the temple, and they began to praise those idol gods, and that's what got Belshazzar in trouble. Okay. Now, if you scroll down to verse 28, we're still in Jeremiah 51. If you scroll down to verse 28, look at what it says. Bring against her the armies of the nations, led by the kings of the Medes and all their captains and officers. Now, of course, we had Daniel 2 and Daniel chapter 2, verse 32, and then we have, of course, Daniel 39. So, but as we see here, excuse me, by the prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah, God had already been saying how Babylon was going to be destroyed. Babylon was going to be conquered and destroyed by the Medo-Persian Empire. So for Daniel, it's new to him because he's hearing it for the first time. But for us who pay attention in scripture, we've already seen God has already said he was going to do that. He already said he was going to destroy them. And that's exactly what happened. That empire fell. And now the Medo-Persian Empire has taken over. So God has already been forewarning, has already been saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. And now here we are. We're seeing where he did exactly what he said he was going to do. Okay. So now let's go to Daniel chapter 6. And we're going to start at verse 1. Okay. And as I said, there's not a big time jump between Daniel 5 and Daniel 6. I think it's been within a few days. I think it's a few days. That's just my opinion. But that's just, what I'm thinking. Okay. So let's do this. Daniel chapter 6, verse 1. Darius the Mede decided to divide the kingdom into 120 provinces, and he appointed a high officer to rule over each province. Okay, so this is what I found for the definition of province. Province is a region within a country. Okay, Now, one example that we have today is the province of Quebec. Okay, it's a region within a country. Okay, so that's what a province is. And look at what it said. He divided it into 120 provinces and appointed each a high officer to rule over each one. So you got 120 provinces, 120 high officers. Okay. Now, verse 2, the king also chose Daniel and two others as administrators to supervise the high officers and protect the king's interests. Verse 3, Daniel soon proved himself more capable than all the other administrators and high officers. Because of Daniel's great ability, the king made plans to place him over the entire king empire. You see that? Daniel was so good at his job, the king wanted to put him over the whole empire. He was going to make him number two, but I think he was going to make him number two behind himself, of course. But he was impressed. Daniel had the experience. Remember, he was in a high position with Nebuchadnezzar, and then he served under Nebuchadnezzar. Then he got promoted to an even higher position with Belshazzar, which I don't think he served long under there, but he's always been in high, wherever Daniel has been, when he was under Babylon, now he's under the Medo-Persian Empire. He has always been he's always been held as in high regard. That's the word I'm looking for. In high regard because of his experience, because of his work ethic, because of his experience. He's got the experience because he's been doing so many different things under each king. So it would, of course, he would excel here because he's been doing it for so long. But this time, not to say that Nebuchadnezzar wasn't impressed last time, he was, but this time Darius the Mede is very impressed. Darius the Mede is like, oh, I'm gonna put him over the whole kingdom. So he had favor with Darius. Okay, but as you know, favor ain't fair. And here comes trouble. Verse 4. Then the other administrators and high officers began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs, but they couldn't find anything to criticize or condemn. I'm sorry. He was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. Verse 5. So they concluded, our only chance of finding grounds for accusing Daniel will be in connection with the rules of his religion. So you see that? He got put up to a high place and the people around him started hating on him. And they like, we got to find a way to get rid of him. They was trying to find any way to they tried to attack his integrity through his job. They couldn't find anything. They tried to attack his character as a person, could not find anything. So then they decided to use his religion against him. They were jealous. See, that's a lesson you guys have to understand. Everybody's not going to celebrate you as God elevates you. And most of the time, it's always the people closest to you. Everybody will not celebrate you. No matter what accomplishments you have, no matter what you have done, no matter how successful you are, everybody's not going to celebrate you. It's just, hey, it is what it is. But you got to be comfortable to know that. You got to be comfortable. But Daniel here, and we're seeing it here. You would think that these high officers will be cool with Daniel, but they're not. They're jealous because they're seeing all the favor that the king is giving Daniel. And they're like, oh, no, we can't have this. So what they do, they all coming together, plotting ways to get rid of him. Don't that sound like what Jesus went through? Sound like exactly what Jesus went through in his day when they were plotting against him. Same thing. So let's look at verse. So, and as we see in verse 5, what they do, they decide to use his religion against him. So let's keep going because let's keep going to see what they do. Verse 6. So the administrators and high officers, I want you to notice something. Look who's in cahoots. It's not just the high officers, the ones who are over the province. It's not just 120 high officers. It's the other administrators too that are working with Daniel, right? So it's two other administrators. We go back to verse 2. Verse 2 says, the king also chose Daniel and 2 others as administrators. So you really have 3 administrators, Daniel plus 2 others. However, the other 2 are and the 120 high officers, they got issues with Daniel. All those people jealous of one man. That's just crazy. But let's keep going. Let's keep going because it's about to get more interesting, right? Verse 6. So the administrators and high officers went to the king and said, long live King Darius. Verse 7. We are all in agreement, we administrators, officials, high officers, advisors, and governors, that the king should make a law that will be strictly enforced. Give orders for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into the den of lions. Verse 8. Well, let's stop at verse 8. So you see, they've already come up with a plan. Look, they've already told you we are all in agreement. Verse 7. So that means they've all come together and they all have a plan of action. So they all come together. They got their plan, and what they do, they put into play. What they do, they go right to the king, and they try to appeal. And look, they try to appeal to his ego. Order that anybody for the next 30 days who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, will be thrown into the den of lions. Okay, so that's the plan that they've all come up with, and they're using the king to get that plan in place. Now, the king, however, I'm about to say Nebuchadnezzar, Darius, forgets about does not know what they're up to. He doesn't know what they're up to, right? So he's just listening in. But look at verse 8. This is where it gets interesting. And now, your majesty, issue and sign this law so it cannot be changed, an official law of the Medes and Persians that cannot be revoked. So King Darius signed the law. You see that there? You see? Why do I say it's interesting? Because when in the Medo-Persian Empire, when a king signs a law into practice, when he signs that law, when he makes a law and he signs it, it cannot be changed, not even by the king himself. Once it's signed in, you can't make any changes to it. You can't make any changes. You can't change the law, but you can add other things around it if you want to change it. Okay? So, and remember, for those of you if you decide to read the book of Esther, that is going to come into play when you read the book of Esther. Okay? If you read the book of Esther, that comes into play. This law right here comes into play about how you can't, once a law is in place, you can't change it. However, you can add to it, but you can't change that law. Once it's in there. Okay. So Darius signed the law, right? Darius doesn't know what's going on. He's just okay. And he signs it. Verse 10. But when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room with its windows open towards Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to his God. Daniel said, okay, I'm still going to do it. I'm still going to give glory and honor to the Most High God. Hallelujah. Verse 11. Then the officials went together to Daniel's house and found him praying and asking for God's help. So they went straight, they dry snitching. Verse 12. So they went straight to the king and reminded him about his law. Did you not sign a law that for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into a den of lions? Yes, the king replied, that decision stands. It is an official law of the Medes and the Persians and cannot be revoked. Verse 13. Then they told the king, that man Daniel, one of your captives from Judah, is ignoring you and your law. He still prays to his God 3 times a day. Verse 14. So hold on, let me stop right here. So do we notice what's going on? This is why they did it for only 30 days, in my opinion. Why they only did it for 30 days, because they already knew Daniel was going to break it within 1 day. They knew it wasn't going to take long. That's why they said just 30 days. So then they go find Daniel because they knew Daniel's habits. They knew what he would be doing. So they go find him, see him praying, and then what they do, they quickly run back to the king. And then look, they quickly run back to him. Verse 14, hearing this, the king was deeply troubled, and he tried to think of a way to save Daniel. He spent the rest of the day looking for a way to get Daniel out of this predicament. You see that in verse 14? He had no clue what the people were up to. Now he knows what they're up to. He knew what they were up to. They were trying to get rid of Daniel, and he knew it. That's why he said that's why the word says he was deeply troubled. And look what he said. He spent the rest of the day trying to figure a way to get Daniel out of this predicament. That's how much favor Daniel had with King Darius at the time. That's how much favor he had. Darius was looking out for him. Darius was like, oh man, I gotta try to figure a way to get him out of this. Daniel had favor with him. Daniel had favor with Nebuchadnezzar, and he had favor with Belshazzar for that little time that he did. But here with Darius really values Daniel. He values him. And Darius is trying to figure a way out now that he knows what they were really up to. Verse 15, in the evening, the men went together to the king and said, Your Majesty, you know that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no law that the king signs can be changed. Verse 16, so at last the king gave orders for Daniel to be arrested and thrown into the den of lions. The king said to him, May your God, whom you serve faithfully, rescues you. So you see what they did? They reminded him about the law couldn't be changed. They were like, okay, you signed this law. You know this law can't be changed. It's signed in. You have to enforce it. They reminded him. After they told him in the morning, Darius spent all day trying to figure a way out of this for Daniel, and he couldn't. They came in the evening and told him, hey, you signed this law into practice. It has to be fulfilled. And finally, he had no choice. He had no choice. But look at what he says. May your God, whom you serve so faithfully, rescue you. This is interesting because Darius is like, okay, the God you serve, because Darius knew only the God that you serve can save you now, because I can't do anything. My hands are tied. He said, may the God you serve. So Darius is really putting it, if you really look at it, Darius really is putting faith in God. He's putting faith in God that God he said, may your God save you. He's really putting some faith in God. And to me, in my opinion, I think Darius was really curious to see, okay, will this God that Daniel served, will the Most High God save him like this? Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Join us here next week as we continue our discussion into the lion's den of Daniel chapter 6 here on the Last Things Podcast. Love you guys. Be blessed.